So it's been a couple weeks now that Black Widow has popped into theaters after what seems like an absolute eternity, sort of being in limbo with the pandemic, all that kind of jazz. And it's really not having the best of times in terms of bringing in good numbers. It started off really strong and then had just an absolute cataclysmic decline right afterward. Now, to give you guys fair warning, I might be one of the biggest Marvel fans that I know in existence. I see absolutely every movie. We watch everything on Disney Plus. I dive into the lore. Yes, I'm just that nerdy. So of course I saw Black Widow on opening night, and I thought it was a fairly decent movie. Nothing that I was going to go to the theaters again, like Infinity War or Endgame, where we went like 3 or 4 times, but it was a decent movie overall. But enough about that, guys. There are a lot of reasons being thrown around right now, both on YouTube and in sort of traditional media, about why Black Widow is doing so poorly, and I think I have a pretty clear understanding of why that is. Alright guys, to give you an understanding of how bad this is, the title of Deadline's most recent article, Black Widow, theater owners blast Disney's day and date strategy for undermining Marvel's picks, box office, and future revenues. This is a pretty big deal, guys. The National Association of Theater Owners has finally spoken out about the financial peril involved in Disney's ambitious day and date theater Disney Plus release of Black Widow. In a press release dropped Sunday afternoon, following the analysis of what went sideways with the Marvel Cinematic Universe title, NATO asks, how can a well-reviewed, well-received, highly anticipated Marvel title underperform, leading to a first weekend Friday to Saturday collapse of 41% and 67% drop in weekend 2. The organization comes to the same conclusions that we did in regards to Black Widow getting her legs picked off. Piracy, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, and Disney Plus at home cannibalization that impacts not just the box office, but the pick's subsequent home window as well. The fact that NATO, kind of funny acronym there, guys, is coming out against sort of Marvel and Disney in particular, that's not a small thing. When theater owners get together and are pissed about it, we could see something like this affecting future Marvel titles. The Disney theatrical day and date Disney Plus model ignores that premium access revenue is not newfound money, but was pulled forward from a more traditional PVOD window, which is no longer an option. Despite assertions that this pandemic-era improvised release strategy was a success for Disney and the simultaneous release model, it demonstrates that an exclusive theatrical release means more revenue for all stakeholders in every cycle of the movie's life, emphasizes the NATO news drop. So from my understanding here, it sounds like NATO just really wanted to have some time between the Disney Plus release and when it went live in theaters, and that seems like it was going to be a decent idea. I don't really know why Marvel and sort of Disney subsequently decided to go against that particular route and anger pretty much all the theater owners. I mean, if I'm a theater owner and Black Widow is absolutely tanking, given what they have to pay, maybe I don't pick up the next sort of non-A tier Marvel title. And here's an important part of the article, guys. Given the opening day-to-weekend ratios of other comparable Marvel movies and other successful pandemic-era titles like Fast and Furious 9 and A Quiet Place Part 2, NATO says that Black Widow should have opened to between $92 and $100 million based on preview revenue compared to the same titles. Black Widow could have opened anywhere from $97 to $130 million. So they're pretty pissed about this, guys. We're not going to get into the crazy numbers here, sort of the average number of people per household. They also had a quote about piracy, and I'm not entirely sold on this, but we're going to talk about it anyway. Piracy no doubt further affected Black Widow's performance and will affect its future performance in international markets where it has yet to open, says the NATO release, with pristine copies also available on a myriad of illegal streaming sites all over the internet. I would imagine that's a small chunk, but I can't imagine they're losing like $100 million worth. Maybe I'm totally not understanding how big of a deal piracy is. But I feel like most people are going to still want to watch in theaters or on Disney Plus rather than have to go through all the piracy stuff they would normally have to do. All right, guys, so some of the reasons why Black Widow has done incredibly poorly, we can talk about the piracy stuff. Sure, that's probably part of it, Disney Plus. But there might be a bigger reason sort of looming above above all of this stuff. And I think this article from Cosmic Book News really sort of hits it home. I didn't know this until just recently. Black Widow woke cuts Robert Downey Jr. Avengers because they're male. If this is actually the case, I mean, like, why wouldn't you want Robert Downey Jr. in your movie? He's traditionally had monster box office numbers for all of his movies, and generally was the highest paid person because of the amount of people he brought to the theaters. The MCU continues its downward trend, which is reflected in the box office. We just talked about that with the recent Black Widow. As it's learned, Robert Downey Jr. and members of the Avengers were dropped from the movie simply because they are male characters. That's strange to me. I mean, like, I get it, the whole woke thing, and I didn't know this either, guys. Recall WandaVision also dropped the use of Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange simply because Marvel didn't want to show a male character helping out a female character. There were some quotes here later about why Black Widow doesn't need boys that just sort of blew my mind a little bit. The director, Kate Shortland, was quoted as saying, initially there were discussions about everything and about all the different characters, and what we decided was, and I think Kevin was really great, he said, she doesn't need the boys. We didn't want it to feel like she needs the support. We wanted her to stand alone, and she does, at the detriment of not having Robert Downey Jr. in your movie and making more money. It doesn't seem like a great idea to sort of make this some sort of political statement about women standing alone when you could have just benefited from Robert Downey Jr. being in the movie and probably would have had a significantly higher opening and better staying power because people were so starved to see him back in the Marvel movies after sort of perishing at the end of Endgame. And the other thing that I think is a really big part of this, guys, is I don't think the timing of Black Widow worked very well for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Getting a little bit nerdy here, this is something that happened right after Civil War. That was many, many years ago, and obviously we already know what happens to Natasha Romanoff's character, Black Widow, perishes in Endgame. You know, it doesn't really feel like it has much impact on the rest of the MCU. It feels like they were just giving Scarlett Johansson a really big role to sort of send her out of the MCU and sort of pop up another character that made a big appearance in Black Widow. It just didn't feel like it had any sort of massive impact on the rest of the MCU the way that, like, Loki did. If you guys have been watching Loki on Disney+, that had massive numbers, felt absolutely colossal for the rest of the MCU, and from my understanding, beat WandaVision in the finale and pulled in a record 2.5 million viewers on Disney+. So I guess the overall thing here, there were a number of factors that contributed to Black Widow not having staying power, and I guess it could still sort of pop up and continue to do okay. There have been other movies that have done that, like Spider-Man Homecoming and Ant-Man and the Wasp, but I mean, if it continues in the current trend, I think we have our reasons. Disney Plus released on the exact same day, piracy, Loki, other MCU titles on Disney Plus having more of an impact, and then sort of finally cutting male Avengers just because they're male. Anyway, let me know what you think, guys. We might be talking about more Marvel stuff in the future. It's one of my many passions. I still enjoyed Black Widow, and I would tell you to go see it if you like all the other Marvel movies, but it's probably on the lowest part of my Marvel movie list of things that I actually enjoy from them, but it was still decent. Make sure to go watch it if you love Marvel, and let me know what you guys thought about the video. Anyway, have a great rest of your day. Make sure to stay safe, sane, and healthy. I'm out.